The Infinite Spark of Being is completely supported by listeners like you. No ads, no sponsors, just your support. If you want to help keep this going, there are 3 support tiers on Patreon for $10 a month, $15 a month, and $20 a month. No locked content, just a way to say I value this. You can also visit the website to check out books, merch, one-on-one sessions with me. Just click the About button, learn a little bit more about who I am and what I have to offer. And don't forget the YouTube page. That has the podcasts as well as binaural beats that help with meditation, rest, and sleep. So thank you for your support. Let's get started. Welcome to the Infinite Spark of Being podcast. My name is Keith Welsh, and if this is your first time here, I'm really glad you found it. But I want to say 2 things before we get started. 1, this is going to be a bit of a snarky episode, so I apologize up front. I can seem full of myself at times and overconfident, but if you get to know me, well, 2 opposites can be true at the same time, right? There's just certain things that I'm really confident about. And 2, I want you to know this podcast isn't about preaching at you or giving you some new ideology to swap in for your old one. This is about remembering who you are. It's about stripping away what you're not, all the layers of fear, programming, and performance, and maybe arriving at something a little quieter and a little more honest. So I want to start today with a question. Have you ever caught yourself saying something not because it's what you truly believe, but because it's what you're supposed to say? Something your group, your family, political tribe, spiritual circle would approve of. You just nod along, repeat the talking points, maybe even get a little self-righteous about it, but somewhere in your gut you feel it. It's that quiet discomfort that says, I didn't actually arrive at this. I inherited it. Or worse, you didn't think about it at all. You just say things, you parrot them, because that's just really what it is. It's convenient, right? That's what we're going to talk about today. This episode is about what happens when we hand over our thinking to someone else, and more importantly, what we can do to stop it. The convenience of dogma, why black and white thinking feels safe, but blocks growth. So there's a kind of peace that comes along with not having to think too hard. And that's the allure of dogma, right? Someone else already did the work. Someone already figured out what's true, who's good, who's evil, what the rules are. All you have to do is sign on the dotted line, memorize the vocabulary, and stay in your lane, and you'll be fine. Don Miguel Ruiz discussed it in the 4 Agreements. Essentially, you woke up into this dream, right? And it's their dream. And it's already here. You didn't have to create it. The guardrails for thinking are already in place. And that can feel really good, especially when the world feels like it's burning down. When you're exhausted, you're stretched too thin, when you don't have the emotional energy to wrestle with complexity. It's easier to just pick a team. It's easier to repeat the script. It's easier to let your identity come prepackaged with a worldview, a political stance, a list of safe opinions, and a handful of approved enemies. And speaking of a list of pre-approved enemies and one where one might acquire this list, I don't even know if NPR, Fox News, MSNBC, or CNN are still functioning or if they've just been reduced to TikTok feeds now. But if you want to get honest, a lot of folks blame social media for the shortened attention span, and yes, there's some blame there, but don't you think that the 24-hour news cycle brought to you by CNN and Turner Broadcasting had something to do with that? And in case you're too young or too oblivious to know, CNN was the first 24-hour news channel, so thanks, Ted. And in case you don't know who Ted is, that's a reference to Ted Turner, who started the network. I realize that may have gone over some heads, and this is a bit early for a digression, but now within 24 hours, this 24-hour cycle they had to themselves, Did they spend even an hour unpacking an idea, talking to the experts, and getting both sides of the story? No, they didn't. Not even in the beginning. It was, and I'm assuming still is, at the most 15-minute clips. What they did was fill a 24-hour period with more stories and that would entertain more people and generate more ad dollars. And I mean, what's news if it's not entertainment, right? But what starts as kind of a relief, this packet of information that you're given by whoever, wherever, it's whether it's a teacher or some talking head on TV, your parents, or some cute little anarchist chick you met living in a college town with poor hygiene, slowly it becomes something else. It becomes a narrowing, a shrinking of possibility. It becomes a barrier between you and reality. Because if I've already decided that the other side is evil, right? That the people who don't agree with me are stupid or brainwashed or lost, then I don't have to listen. I don't have to learn. I don't have to grow. I just get to be right. And being right, especially in public, it's got currency, right? But let me tell you something. You can be right and still be asleep. You can be right and still be lost. You can be right and still have no idea who you are, what life is actually about, or any of that. So if you're new to this podcast, how some artists have songs they sing, right? I have things that I say. Let's call them songs. And this song is called Widgets. Now, some of you have been hearing me say this for possibly 10 years, but I believe it's one of my favorites. It's one of my hits, to me anyway. So here it goes. Imagine that we're sitting at a table, and on this table, I've placed an object that you've never seen. Since you've never seen it, your mind hasn't really applied any meaning or value to it. So I tell you, this thing is called a widget, and it's very dangerous. I then proceed to tell you everything that I know about widgets, and you believe me. Maybe we're friends or family, or you perceive me as some sort of authority figure, but either way, you believe me. You don't really question me. And not only do you not question me about the widgets, but you also don't question yourself as to why you believe me. Why don't we ask questions? Because the mind, the nervous system, it wants safety. The body doesn't want to go wander around in the woods in exile. It doesn't want to go wander around in the desert. Remember, the mind will always choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. Now, when people hear the word dogma, they usually think of religion, but I want to be clear, this isn't just about organized religion. This shows up everywhere. It shows up in progressive political movements, conservative political movements. It shows up in conspiracy circles. It shows up in social justice work, and it absolutely shows up in spiritual communities, even with those of you that say you're spiritual and not religious. I've seen it, I've felt it, I've participated in it. And there's this subtle pressure to say the right thing, to share the right meme, to adopt the right spiritual language. Suddenly, everyone's talking about the ego or vibrations or manifesting or non-duality. But if you scratch the surface, a lot of them are just mimicking each other. They're quoting teachers instead of thinking. They're sounding spiritual instead of being awake. I mean, the desire to belong is very strong. The desire to be seen as someone who gets it is strong. And that performance, that dogma dressed up as wisdom, kills real self-inquiry. Because if you already think you know, then you stop paying attention. I've seen this with teachers that I adore. Did I stop listening when I saw, or at least perceived, thoughtlessness? No, because it didn't change the teaching, right? We saw it when everyone circled their wagons around the Dalai Lama when he sucked on that kid's tongue or whatever the hell he did. You saw all of these Westerners that were suddenly experts in Tibetan culture telling us that it's perfectly normal to do this sort of thing. Look, I don't give a shit if the Buddha himself sucked, kissed or pulled tongues to say hello or to be cute or whatever the fuck it was. It's a different time. Don't suck on tongues. And it's just a blanket rule. Don't put your fucking mouth on people. So So many Buddhists just blindly tried to defend it. I, of course, took a bit of a different route and recorded a podcast laughing at the whole thing. Either way, this incident with the Dalai Lama doesn't change the effectiveness of the practice, not tongue-sucking, but other practices, nor does it change the truth of what's being taught in Buddhism or the truth of what he said in the past. And if it does fuck it up for some, well, that's not really my problem. That's like when the subject of God or Christianity comes up and some jackass says, well, priests fuck kids. Well, yeah, some have. And I'm sure a few Amazon drivers have too. So are you going to stop ordering Amazon packages? You're going to change that. You get the point. Look, one of the attractive things to me about Buddhism is the idea that debate, even when we agree, is a practice. It's a practice of picking at things until you're only left with the truth. And that's what truth with a capital T requires, right? If you're afraid to kill your idols, then you're afraid to look behind the curtain, then you're not a seeker. You're not interested in truth. You're interested in comfort, and that's fine, but don't forget, comfort will kill you every single fucking time. Nothing thrives in ease. Everything requires stress and pressure to grow and to evolve. And on that note, we can't talk about dogma without talking about politics. And don't worry, I'm not here to tell you what side to vote for or what party is better. That's not what I do here. But I do want to talk about how political identity, like spiritual identity, can become a kind of escape from thinking. You ever notice how political belief these days feels like ordering from a prefixed menu? If you believe this one thing, then you're expected to believe the whole bundle. Like, if you think universal healthcare is a good idea, then you must also believe in X, Y, and Z. Or if you're skeptical about the government, then you suddenly are supposed to believe in every conspiracy-laden worldview, and you better be mad about the same things your team is mad about, or you're out. You're a traitor, right? It becomes this weird kind of consumer identity. You don't just hold a political opinion anymore. You wear it, you perform it, you make it part of your aesthetic. And God forbid you ask the question that crosses the aisle, right? Because now you're not loyal. Now you're problematic. Now you're a threat. The irony is all this political dogma is framed in moral superiority, like we're on the good team. The other side is dangerous, stupid, or evil, right? And I'm not saying that there aren't real issues. Of course there are, but you don't fix those things by blindly towing a line, right? I realize I'm being a bit vague and whatever, but you fix these things by thinking critically. I mean, if one was objectively good, right, and the other was objectively bad, then why isn't one group suffering and the other one not, right? Instead, you have people from each belief system, and it is a belief system, living their best lives, right? All of it lacks objectivity. Remember, for it to be objective, it can't involve personal preferences, opinions, or taste, right? It can't involve personal tastes. And here's where it overlaps with spirituality, because when your political or religious identity becomes more important than your humanity, when you care more about being right than being real, that's not activism anymore. That's not even truth seeking. That's just ego maintenance, right? That's your fears dressed up as principles. You know, I think the most dangerous thing is the way in which three religions, you know who you are, got tangled up with politics, when the religious doctrine of the groups actually conflicts with their political philosophy. Then we have to sit here and watch them all perform these mental gymnastics to make sense of their own religious literature and start translating things. It's pretty fascinating to watch. So what's the alternative? How do we move from rigid political identities to something deeper, something more thoughtful? Well, that brings us to something that the ancient Greeks were doing thousands of years ago, something that might sound old-fashioned, but it's exactly what we need right now. So let's talk about Plato, let's talk about the dialectic. How do we ask questions from the other side of an issue with the intention of understanding and not winning? How do we stay open? How do we stay curious? Especially when certainty feels so comforting, right? Remember, the mind will choose a familiar hell over an unfamiliar heaven. Well, this is where I want to bring in something from Plato. It's something called the dialectic. It's this ancient method of questioning, right? It's about drawing out deeper truths through dialogue, right? Through talking. It's not about winning. It's not about crushing the other person's will in an argument. It's about asking sincere questions. It's not meant to trap the other person, but to actually understand their perspective. So Socrates, who was Plato's teacher, would walk around Athens asking people what they believed. What is justice? What is courage? What is love? And he wouldn't let them settle on these surface level answers, right? He'd keep asking, he'd keep pushing, he'd keep unpacking their assumptions. And a lot of the times they got mad at him, which, it's understandable, been there, because it's uncomfortable to realize that the thing you've built your whole identity on might not be as solid as you thought. But that discomfort, that's where growth is. That's where the light gets in. And that's the opposite of dogma. Dogma is allergic to questions, right? It wants to shut the door. It wants to say, we already know, don't ask that. But the dialectic says, let's go deeper. Now, what's wild is that this kind of inquiry isn't just a Greek thing. It's not just Socrates wandering around the agora asking annoying questions. In certain Tibetan Buddhist lineages, especially in the Gelug school, debate itself is a spiritual path, like an actual formal discipline. Monks will study logic and philosophy for years, and then they go into these long, passionate debates as a part of their training. And if you've ever seen it, it's intense. It's not passive. One monk stands and questions, clapping their hands loudly with each point that they're making, and the other one has to sit on the ground and answer. It's loud, it's physical, it's very precise. And they'll argue about things like the nature of emptiness, the self, karma, impermanence. And it's not to win the argument, because they all ultimately believe the same thing, but it's to refine their understanding, right? They're not trying to dominate each other. They're trying to wake each other up. And I love that, because in a lot of these modern spiritual circles, debate is seen as egoic. If you question something, or if you push back on a teaching, you might be resisting, or you're still in your head. But these traditions, they believe in asking sharp questions, and they believe that it's part of awakening. You don't get to bypass the mind. You're going to have to live with it. So you might as well refine the mind, right? Purify it through precision, right? You ask not to be right, but to be clear, because that's what we're all after, right? We want clarity. We don't want comfort. And that ties right back into what we've been talking about, dogma, right? Dogma, whether it's political or spiritual, asks you to stop thinking. It says just agree, just repeat. But these traditions, whether it's Socrates in the marketplace or a Tibetan monk clapping his hands in a debate, they say the opposite. They say question, go deeper, test everything, make the truth yours. Buddha said that. Buddha said, don't believe me, try it. Like, don't just take my word for it, right? And if your ideas can't survive a little pressure, right? If they fall apart, they were probably just borrowed beliefs anyway. They weren't really your ideas, or they at least weren't things that you really spent time thinking about. So if debate and dialectic are tools to refine the truth externally, in dialogue with others, that is, then self-inquiry is the same tool turned inward. It's like debating yourself, not in a self-critical, beat yourself up kind of way, but in a way that's genuinely curious, open, and honest. So for me, when I notice that I'm caught up in a belief or an assumption, maybe about myself or someone else or the world, especially if I notice that it's having a negative effect on me and making life a little harder, I'll pause and start asking questions. And sometimes it really does feel like a conversation. One part of me will say, that person disrespected me. And then the other part, the quieter voice, will, that's trying to wake me up, will say, okay, and what exactly do you mean by that? I'll question myself. Or what are you really upset about here? What is this really? And you have to be willing to go into your gross, dark parts of the closet and just look at it. And it's not about spiraling into self-doubt. It's about opening. It's about loosening the grip that our automatic beliefs have on us and asking, where did it come from? Is this actually true? Who am I when I believe this thought? And more importantly, who would I be without that thought? Would I be happier? Would I be more open? Would I be more helpful, right? Because if you're just reacting to life, clinging to these inherited beliefs and lashing out when you're challenged or feeling secretly terrified of being wrong, then you're not living from the soul. You're living from your programming. You're living as the body. You're living from the body. And the body has a lot of biological imperatives that result in very fearful thinking. But when you begin to dialogue with yourself, be gentle, be honest, be compassionate, that's when things start to shift. That's when the stories fall away. That's when real spiritual clarity begins. And the best part is that you don't need to go to a monastery. You don't need a robe. You don't even need to leave your house. You can do this kind of inquiry while walking your dog, doing dishes, sitting in traffic, because your life, your mind, your reactions, your beliefs, those are the perfect classroom. That's where we're learning. We're learning from ourselves. We're learning the way, due to the fact that my mind relates poorly to this thing or that thing, that's my classroom. That's my curriculum. So if Plato had the dialectic, right, and the monks had their debate, this internal checking in, this inner dialogue, this is one of the mystics' sacred practices. Right? And some of us, that's really what we are. We're just modern mystics. And it's not always loud. It's not always profound, but it's yours and it's honest. And that's what matters. It's some of the real serious parts of our curriculum. No one is going to know about it. It's just us. And that's often the stuff that we're most afraid to look at, right? The stuff that we won't say to other people, but it's in there kind of clawing at the door. That's the stuff we really need to probably work with. That's probably more of our sincere and real curriculum than all the other stuff. So let's zoom out from ancient Greece and talk about where this shows up now, right, in everyday life. I've worked with a lot of people in addiction, people recovering from trauma, people in grief. And one thing I've noticed is that when someone's world has been shattered, they often look for something solid to cling to, or more accurately, their mind does. And that can be religion. It can be politics, believe it or not. It could be new age spirituality. They want something to hold on to because everything else has fallen apart. And they're not doing this consciously. That's the thing I've really noticed. It's a subconscious drive. And I understand that. I understand it very well, but if the thing you're clinging to doesn't leave room for you to ask questions, right? If it punishes doubt or shames curiosity and demands this total loyalty, then it's not healing you. It's just sedating you. And that goes for the church. That's the obvious one, right? And since we're talking about addicts as well, I mentioned them. AA, same thing. Your yoga classes, some of them around here get very deep, very in depth with a teacher. And I've had people stand in my living room and say, absolutely 100% grade A incorrect shit that isn't even, not only is it not in any text anywhere, but it is not even historically accurate. So this stuff isn't just relegated to like big book thumping AA, Bible thumping Christians and all this kind of stuff. This happens in every movement. In fact, I remember something. Right before I took refuge, it was the week before the refuge ceremony was that weekend. And this woman after our satsang goes, "Hey, are you going to take refuge this weekend?" And I was still relatively new to the Sangha. And I said, "Yeah, I think I'd like to." And this guy, Bruce, I'll never forget him. This old man, crotchety variant, had a Vajra tattoo on his arm, which is, it was just kind of out of place because he was kind of like your typical little old man. He comes up to me, he starts pounding his fist in his hand. He goes, if you take refuge, then you have to accept every word of the Dharma as true. And my nervous system tightened up. I was like, oh, bro, I've seen this shit before. But that's just obviously one person. But, but my point is that it happens everywhere. I remember being at the Krishna temple, and one time someone greeting me saying Hare Krishna, instead of me saying Hare Bol, I just accidentally said, hey, what's up? And they looked at me like I was fucking crazy. Like, how dare you? Right? And that whole thing, that becomes like sedation. You're sedated in a way because you're not really thinking about what your response is. Right? And that people that are sedated, they're not at peace. It's not the same thing as being at peace, because peace allows for freedom. Right? And Bruce, was attached to his journey with the Dharma. And, he actually knew Lama Losan before Lama Losan was Lama Losan, when his name was just David. So, and sometimes Bruce would call him Dave, which was super fucking gross. But anyway, so this kind of thoughtless dogma, it happens everywhere. You see this in families, right? Maybe you grew up in a household where questioning authority wasn't allowed. So now you're pounding your fist in a Buddhist shrine room. Maybe love was conditional. So now you're wearing a dhoti and you're upset because someone didn't say Haribol. Maybe your value came from how obedient or how agreeable you were. So now you're very much primed for these things. And now as an adult, you might find yourself doing the same thing as your parents, right? It's funny, you think about that, as you'd be in this like take like the Hare Krishna farm, you'd be there and like maybe, I'm not going to say that. I'll look at myself. Okay. For a long time, I believed that I was very different from my parents. Like somebody would look at my path in life and be like, oh my God, you're so different from your mom and your dad, but I'm not. I have the same intensity as them, but it's just about different shit. I'm not better or different. I'm like, they were both kind of rebellious people, as was I as a kid. And we just rebelled in different ways. I'm just like them. I took birth with them because we had a bunch of shit in common. Remember that, This isn't a judgment. I'm not trying to judge anything. It's just a pattern, right? And once you see the pattern, you can work with it, you can break it, you can stop it, whatever. But you got to at least start looking at these things. And one of the things for me was looking at how much I was just like my parents. And what's funny is now when those things come up, instead of me rolling, I'd be like, oh God, I can't believe I'm like my fucking dad. I kind of laugh and I just give my dad kind of a nod. I'm like, I get it. I see why you were the way you were. And another thing, when people come to me for coaching or meditation or just to talk, they usually think that they want answers, right? But what they really want underneath that is clarity. They want to feel free. They want to feel like they can trust their own mind again. Like they can walk into a room and not have to act out some role. Like they can just be themselves. And that doesn't come from parroting something. That doesn't come from like going from parroting your parents and their political beliefs to like now parroting some new age spiritual group or whatever. That doesn't even come from agreeing with the group. That comes from slowing down. It comes from asking, where did this belief come from? Does it still serve me? And am I willing to let go of it if it doesn't serve me? And that's hard, but that's real. And sometimes you ask the teacher that, where did this come from? Why do you believe this? What is this about? And if you're working with me, I say this to people all the time, don't let me get away with saying this crazy shit. You question my ass, especially if you're paying me. Like, don't let me get away with that. Like, lay into me, ask me questions. Because another thing, it's not your job to understand me. It's my job to say it in a way that breaks through for you. And if you're not getting it, and if it's not clicking, it's not you, it's me. Okay? Just know that. So I want to ask you something directly in this podcast. And I want you to really sit with this one. What beliefs are you holding right now that you've never questioned? What opinions do you defend, not because you've explored them front to back and whatever, but because they're part of your identity? What would it mean for you to say, I don't know? I don't know. What would it cost you to admit that something you believed in, maybe for years, no longer feels true? That's a big one. And more importantly, what might it open up, right? So here's something that you can do. Get your journal or just open a blank note in your phone, whatever it is, and write this at the top of the page. Things that I believe but have never questioned, and just start listing them. It could be about politics, spirituality, relationships, family stuff, money, God, yourself, whatever. Then pick one and start asking, where did I learn this? Who benefits from me believing this? That's a big one. That's a really big one, especially if it's relationship stuff. And then ask yourself, is it even true? And do I still want it? That's it. That's the practice. You're not trying to get to the right belief, right? It's not about the right belief. You're just trying to wake up, right? It's kind of like you go through the Four Noble Truths. The first time you hear them, you're like, oh my God, I am grasping. I am clinging. That is the root of my suffering. Holy shit. But it doesn't mean that it goes away. It just means now you're aware of it, and being aware of it takes its teeth out, right? So the mind always prefers certainty, right? The nervous system will always choose what feels familiar. But the soul came here to remember something. And remembering takes effort. It takes honesty. It takes space. You don't need to know everything. You don't need to be right all the time. You don't need to belong to the loudest team, okay? You just need to be willing to let go of the script you were handed and listen for what's true. Even if it's quiet, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it changes tomorrow. That's what growth looks like. That's what freedom looks like. To just not care whether you're wrong. Great, I'm wrong. I'll move on. Okay, I'll change it. I love you. I love you. I love you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. If the infinite spark of being has brought you any value, consider supporting the work. You can join the Patreon for $10, $15, or $20 a month. It's a simple way to keep this project going with no ads, no fluff, just us. You can also head to theinfinitesparkofbeing.com for books, merch, one-on-one sessions with me. Just click the About button, learn a little bit more about what I do. Also, check out the YouTube channel for episodes and binaural beats that help with meditation, rest, and sleep. I love you. Thank you. Take care. See you next week.